Hi, everybody. It's day 4, and I'm distracted by this pile. I've noticed this pile's been here all week, and I just clearly keep walking by it. Oh well. Okay, so I am going to talk about a story about the Sea of Galilee again. And this story actually happened before the story from yesterday. So yesterday we retold the story about Jesus walking on water and the miracle that he performed, and just what in our lives do we need to do to get out of the boat, right? So this week I want to talk a little bit about another story that has to do with the Sea of Galilee. And if you missed yesterday, I suggest you go back and do day 3's devotional first, and then this one. This one's going to be a lot shorter because I don't really need to give you a lot of the background of the Sea of Galilee because I gave it to you yesterday. But one verse that I just want to start off with as we dive into the 4th chapter of Mark. So yesterday we were in chapter 14. Today we're going to be in chapter 4. But it comes from James 4 verse 8. And that verse says, "Draw near to God and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded." This passage, this story is going to talk a lot about drawing near to Christ. Okay, so let's start on the story here that begins in chapter 4. Again, Jesus had been preaching. He'd been telling stories. He'd been telling parables to lots of different crowds. And Jesus says in chapter 4, verse 35, he says, that day when the evening came, he said to the disciples, "Let us go over to the other side." So remember, this sea is really a lake, and it's basically surrounded by lots of hills. These disciples were already fishermen, as we learned yesterday, and they'd spent their lives fishing on this huge lake. And so Jesus says, hey, let's go over to the other side, because here there was Capernaum, which was, I don't want to get too much into the geography, but there's Capernaum, and there's the Sea of Galilee and the whole Galilean region. And you could go back and forth between Capernaum and Cana, which is another place that Jesus would go back and forth to. So one quick way was to just cross the lake, cross the lake, or cross the sea, as they call it, because it was huge. Okay, so leaving the crowd behind, this is who Jesus had been preaching to. They took him along. That's the disciples took Jesus along just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with them. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Now, this was a really scary storm, okay? And the way that it's described in this story, it actually may have been a scarier storm than the storm where Jesus actually walked on the water from yesterday. And so this furious squall is coming up. Waves are crashing over the boat. I mean, you can just imagine. So the boat was nearly swamped. So I'm sure these fishermen were very afraid of drowning, of their boats sinking, and so forth. And Jesus was in the stern. So my dad is a captain, so I happen to know just from growing up that the stern is in the back of the boat. The bow is the front, the stern is in the back. So Jesus was in the stern sleeping on a cushion. Okay, so this huge storm is going on, and Jesus is sleeping through it. And the disciples woke him and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" And so Jesus gets up, he rebukes the winds, and he says to the waves, "Quiet, be still." And then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. And he said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" Right? And so Jesus was basically saying, hey guys, you've been with me. I've been teaching parables. Haven't you learned anything? I just said, let's go to the other side. I didn't say, let's go to the middle of the Sea of Galilee and drown, right? So he's saying to these guys, hey, have some faith in me. And Jesus does never promise smooth sailing for us, right? I think this is also a metaphor that we can apply into our lives today. And again, yesterday I talked a lot about God's character from the beginning of time until now. He's never promised us a calm sea, right? So the fact now that we're studying two stories this week out of the book of Mark that talk about the Sea of Galilee being tumultuous and waves and squalls coming up, there's something to be said about that very rarely are there stories about they just like gently got from one side to the other. There are going to be storms in our life, and maybe not a physical storm that you're dealing with, but something that's giving you anxiety, or something that's giving you grief, or something that's giving you hesitation. And remember that, we have two choices. We can either try to deal with these storms that happen in our life alone, or we can try to figure out how to confess to Christ that we need him and that we need to cast all of this anxiety and these storms to him so that he can help carry us through. So the last verse 41 says, they were terrified and asked each other, who is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him. It's amazing. So we've got these two options, right? When we have our storms in our life, we can worry and assume that Jesus no longer cares, right? Or we can resist fear, putting our trust in him. So when we feel like we're panicked, when we feel like we're having anxiety, let's confess our need for God and trust him to care for us. It is better to be in a storm with Jesus than anywhere else without him. So today, when you have your quiet time, I want to encourage you to just pray, and I'm going to attach a little image to our post today. And it basically says, just so I can get it, it's better to be in a storm with Jesus than anywhere without him, right? And he really is. He will let you feel his presence when you ask for it. We are never alone. And our life, if you're going through a storm right now, it won't be your last. And if you're in a place of peace right now, it won't last forever either. There's going to be storms, and it's through the storms that the growth and the intimacy with Christ happens, when you let him know and confess that we need him. So I just want to encourage you to pray today that if you are in the middle of a storm, that you are asking God to just hover over you so that you don't feel alone, and that he would just, give you peace and take anxiety and give you wisdom on how to handle whatever it is you're going through. And if you're in a place of peace right now, I just want to encourage you to pray and thank God for the storms that he has given you. So going back to the day when we talked about making gratitude a lifestyle, praying that he would continue to use the storms that you've already had in your life as an opportunity for you to continue to grow in your faith. So I hope this helps you guys today. I have loved this so far. I can't believe we only have one day left together. But peace be with you. Bye, guys.